The actor uses words and expression and gesture to convey feeling and situation. But in true life, we use words and facial expressions and so on to conceal the truth, to produce, if you like, the public animal. Now, the doctor has the great privilege of knowing the private animal. He knows in many cases the disturbed and ill-mannered adolescent, so well groomed and so charming on public occasions. He knows the agony that walks the streets, smiling benignly and opening bazaars. He knows the tremendous insecurity of the successful executive who is an alcoholic. And these are his privileges, and these are his burdens.
For 21 years, Eric Wilkes has been a country doctor. But is the care he provides for his patients relevant today, or is general practice a dying art?
Yes, it very likely is at that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Managed to avoid the flu so far?
I have indeed, yes.
Good.
For Wilkes and his junior partner, the first stop on their rounds in this North Derbyshire village is the post office. Requests for home visits and prescriptions are left for them in a brown bag. The doctors come to the villagers because there's little public transport to the surgery 4 miles away, and it's a convenient means of keeping an eye on their patients.
Repeat prescription. Right, thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Now I best take the money.
Better take your bottles.
Empty bottles.
Wilkes is also Professor of Community Care and General Practice at Sheffield University. Part of his brief is to discover whether doctors are losing touch with their patients and whether this happens more in cities than in the country. He now comes here only occasionally, but his outlook has been formed by his experiences as a young doctor.
You remember that super old lady you introduced me to, old Sarah?
Oh, yes, I remember Sarah. Sarah thought I was the greatest doctor in the world. And she relied, I used to think, on my weekly visits to keep her going, to keep her in touch with the world. And then I had to go to the States for 3 or 4 months on a fellowship. And I worried tremendously as to how Sarah would manage without me. And I warned her that I'd only be away a few months and the other doctors would look after her. But I worried about her. And then it just so happened, after I came back, there was a day or two before I started work. But I drove by her house, and there she was, sitting outside in the sun. So naturally, I nipped out of the car, and I bent forward and I said, "Hello, how are you?" And she said, "All right." And I said, "How have you been this last few months?" And she said, "All right." The conversation limped a little. And suddenly, the beloved physician had a thought. And I said, "Tell me, do you know who I am?" "Oh, yes," she said. "You're the insurance." It's very good. My goodness.
She really does cope very well. As you can see, she's got a coal fire in the kitchen.
Yeah.
She's got several buckets of coal, which she incidentally brings in herself on a trolley.
The first visit is to the home of Polly. She's a chronic arthritic who finds it difficult to get about. Before they see her, there's an opportunity for a little medical detective work to check how well she's coping.
So that really she's totally independent in a setup which would be a source of tremendous resentment by lots of young, fit people.
Modern medicine can do little to cure Polly, but the doctors at least have time for what Wilkes believes is their most important task, to ensure the general well-being of their patient.
And what, has she got difficulty with shopping, getting food in?
She does very well, as you'll see through here. People are very good about getting her supplies in, and I would say she eats to a very high standard.
Yeah. Well, she couldn't survive unless she did, really, could she? That's right. I must admit that I'm pretty surprised you've got such a grip on your independence still, because you've been handicapped to some degree for a long time now. Do you get upstairs still?
Yes, Doctor.
Do you? How do you get upstairs?
On my hands and knees, like I used, and back down.
That's right. And presumably, You live in a world of cold tea and bread and margarine. You never have a decent meal, do you?
I do. If I get a chicken,
Yeah.
well, I have to stand the stove on a little chair in the wash house.
Yeah.
And I've got a little oven I stand on the top. And I do it in the little oven on the top of the stove, you see. The stove cooks it.
And how's the other important member of the household doing?
That's not the same cat that used to be here years ago when I
It was here, Dr. Wilkes, when Elsie was here, and she said to you, no, Doctor, he'll shake hands. And you shook hands with him, I remember.
That's right, I remember shaking hands.
He doesn't
Yeah.
shake hands with me, that's for sure. He sleeps through my consultations. Come on, Toby.
Well, he's not.
Let's
You've
have a
never
try.
asked me to ask
Let's
him.
have a
You
look
try
at
and
Put
it.
shake
him on
hands
here,
with
then.
Come
You're
on,
bringing all his... Wait a minute.
come on.
He said, wait a minute, now, Mrs. After two to be first. He said, whatever are you doing at me?
Sorry to wake you up. You look
Now,
so
look.
comfy.
No. Not for a start off, you don't. You sit very nicely,
That's right.
like a good little boy, yes, and give me a paw. Come on. No, don't do that. Come on. Come on. Your paw.
He says, give me a chance to wake up.
Now, look, sit nicely. Come on, that's a good boy.
There he is.
Ah, that's right. I remember
boy.
that from years
Come
ago.
on, then, you now. You don't shake. Come on, Dr. Wilkes, does he look?
Thank you. Good day to you, Toby.
Here, Toby.
There's the other, the new doctor. That's right. That's right. Oh, we're all equally honoured. In this particular patient, you've seen that she is disabled, but that she's coping. The coal buckets are full. The larder is well stocked. The place is clean. She lives in an incredibly restricted world, but she's triumphant in that small world with her courage and her independence and her cat. And this is something you cannot diagnose by transporting her to some health centre or outpatients and looking at her arthritic ankle.
But what kind of things give you clues that might help you to treat the patient?
All sorts of clues, some of which are almost dealt with subconsciously, but some of which you learn the hard way. The pile of empty whiskey bottles under the kitchen sink may tell you far more than any wife or any husband about the real problems. Nosiness is a basic requirement of the GP and can occasionally be a mere impertinence, but on other occasions can save life. And I think that to find out how warm, how well administered, how the survival kit of the whole home is geared to maintain that independence is part of the GP's world, part of his job. It's no one else's responsibility. Although in a village like this, the whole village, to a variable degree, takes part in that responsibility. Polly is tremendous. She's brave, she's independent, she's a survivor. But the village is involved in her survival. This is something you see in a village. It's now pretty difficult to find in the anonymous jungles of suburbia.
Nine o'clock on a Monday morning in Barnsley, general practice in action in a busy town. Today, the doctor has 30 sick notes to deal with. 30 patients need to be signed back to work before proper morning surgery can begin. Such scenes are routine in a heavy industry area like this, where accidents are frequent.
Okay, Mr. Thank you. Morning. Riley. Mr. Yes, it's Riley. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Come on, it's Riley.
Signing sick notes is a chore which eats into the time the doctor can spend with patients who are seriously ill.
Start.
Here there can be none of the coziness of the country practice, and little chance also to administer to the needs of the not-so-sick, the chronic and the old and lonely.
It's Mr.
I have noticed broaded. I don't know. It says noticed down on me.
Actually, no, he's got your wrong resume. What's your full name, Mr. Broadhead?
Malcolm broaded.
And what you want to start on
Next month.
next month? Right, Mr. Broadhead. Okay. Come on, Mr. Broadhead.
Part of Wilkes' job is to visit practices like this one. Here, 4 doctors have to deal with 12,000 patients. Wilkes' aim is not only to see the patients are getting suitable care, but that doctors can cope.
Thank you very much. A doctor like this one is working a very busy, very full day, day after day, week after week, month after month. He's seeing a lot of patients. Most of those are with trivial or self-limiting illnesses, but all the time he knows that if he just coasts along, if he loses his concentration, this may mean death or disaster for one patient. And this, no matter how clinically experienced you are, is a problem that is always with one. One lives with this, one adjusts to this, it's part of the routine professional burden. But it's there. And I find it fantastic that although you get doctors who are negligent and hit the newspapers, when you consider the workload of individual doctors such as this one, and you aggregate them up into something like 23,000 general practitioners in the country, it's absolutely shattering. Not that there are so many disasters, but that there are so few. And this is because of the ruthless self-exploitation of the doctors by the doctors. They are giving almost all they've got. They have very little slack to take up in the course of an epidemic. They're at full stretch now and all the time.
We try our best to do what we can at the material at time and with the amount of time available for us. That's all I could say, really. That you do jolly along sometimes. But we try to prevent excessive return of consultations. So we use a lot of antibiotics in practice, and it does tend to stop a lot of things. It could be said that we overuse them. Well, if we underuse them, it would be far worse. You would have probably 2 visits, 3 visits instead of 1.
But are you really able to care for your patients as you feel you really should?
Well, I would say we are, but it's a very difficult job. You are going all the time, and you're in a stress and tension all the time. You can't relax. You can't take your time, and that, of course, is not the best thing to do.
This is medicine under stress. This is medicine under difficulties. At its worst, this is cattle market medicine.
But despite the overbearing pressures of the cities, a handful of doctors are managing to salvage some of the proven values of family medicine. This doctor, a friend of Wilkes, has begun what he calls his love round in a rundown area of Sheffield. Every day he drops in on one of his elderly patients. None of them are seriously ill, but the regular visits mean he can keep a constant eye on them and watch for any changes in their condition.
The door's usually open. Hello, love. How are you?
All right, how are you?
Very well, very well.
Well, sit down.
Thank you very much. Whoops.
Such visits have unseen benefits. The 2 sisters who live here, for example, never know exactly when the doctor will call. This means they'll keep a fire burning more often than usual, and they'll eat hot meals, with some food to spare for the doctor.
Lovely.
You want some curry?
We're not... Oh, that's nice. It'd
No,
be
you won't
just
eat
a
all-
job
You
today.
know, it just warms you up, doesn't it?
Aye. We're not taking yours, are we?
No, we've had ours.
Oh, that's nice.
Tell me, do you always do this for your doctor?
When it's cold weather.
Ah, I
Well,
see.
we have to look after him because he looks
Well,
after
he looks
us.
after us, you see.
Does he?
Yeah, he does.
Is he any good?
He is a good doctor.
Is he?
He's been a good doctor.
Better have a look at your tablets now and see how... Are they all here?
Yes, his man there.
That's yours and your sister's all together. Oh dear.
Oh, that's going to be bad luck.
Never mind. Do I have to throw a bit over my
Right on your
shoulder?
left shoulder.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've got them trained how to behave, haven't you?
Now,
This is the doctor's only chance to check that his patients are listening to his advice and actually taking the pills he has prescribed for them.
these are for your arthritis.
Yeah.
How is your arthritis? Is it troubling you much? Are these keeping it under control?
I'm walking better than what I have done.
That's nice.
Here are 2 oldish people living on their own, and as soon as one comes into the door, one sees that they are cheerful, they are alert, they are confident, none of which would have been necessarily
very easily checked in a formal consulting room consultation. One sees, as one sees so very often in North Country homes, that the house is spotless, beautifully maintained in spite of the advancing years. One has been given a bowl of soup, which would have been rather superior by Savoy Hotel standards. One has been given a welcome, and one has seen a brisk cheerfulness about the place, where one knows these people are coping very well. These people are keeping themselves in February fairly warm. They are in command of the situation. This is something which you cannot attain from a traditional couch examination. This sort of relationship has to be carved out of a busy day for those who are judged in greatest need. There may be other patients who have to be fairly firmly disciplined so that they do not inappropriately demand this sort of treatment. But for patients who are elderly and invalid and living alone, the pills are terribly important. The pills may be life-saving, but they are, as I think one clearly saw today, only a part of the doctor-patient situation.
Anyway, that was lovely.
You enjoyed
Thank you very
it?
much.
Sometimes the best help the doctors can give the elderly is more practical than medical.
What about your breathing? That's as bad as ever, is it? How are your ankles? Are they swelling as much as they were?
No.
A lot better, are they? That's good. And how are those new tablets?
Huh?
Those new tablets, do you manage to swallow them all right?
Oh, sure, but then get some tea.
In the country, there may be less need for such a conscious effort.
There's already, in a village like this, a whole subtle organisation of care. It's something that in the cities, huge departments full of social workers can't hope to emulate. And although the village is involved in caring, the machine breaks down. Something new, something complicated happens, which is roughly the doctor's business. And when that happens, he has to intervene, and it may be in a very routine, trite sort of way, making a diagnosis and producing treatment, but it may be in all sorts of ways, because in a village like this, whatever no one else is doing, or is capable of doing, is to some degree the doctor's job, in my opinion. If you're in a country practice, you're there to look after the people in a manner that is possible for you, for your resources, and when it's nobody else's business. It's the doctor's business.
What kind of things have you had to do for your patients here in this village that you weren't trained to do in medical school?
Well, I remember in one patient's house, what was really breaking the heart and back of the wife was not the fact that her husband was paralyzed, but the fact that the washing, the laundry, especially the sheets, were the whole sort of crucial factor, the last straw. And the most valuable thing I did was to batter at the door of a local charity so that she got a washing machine. Now, scrounging of washing machines doesn't figure very prominently in the traditional student's curriculum, but I think it was probably one of the most valuable things I did.
Another condition not usually mentioned in medical textbooks is the sadness of bereavement.
Hello.
Good morning, Dr. Watts. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, really.
I've sat in this room many a time before.
Yes, yeah, haven't we?
But usually with your husband as well.
Yes, well, after times, wasn't we?
Ah, that's right. How are you managing without him?
Well, we've got to keep going, haven't we? You know what you told me before, the world keeps going.
The world keeps going, that's
Yeah.
right. As I remember, your husband was the gardener, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
He didn't do much in the house.
No.
That was your kingdom.
That was my kingdom.
So as far as the everyday housekeeping is concerned,
but only perhaps as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
You don't miss him all that much. He wasn't very good with the chores.
No, he got better he got better lately.
He was a late
Because,
learner, was he?
Yes, he was a late learner. But he was gardening on the day before he was taken ill.
That's not bad.
No, he was taking the Brussels, and I think he dug a piece of garden there.
Not bad. Do you miss him very much still?
Yes, I do, very much.
Do you get depressed?
Yes, sometimes, more sometimes than others.
Of course. But you battle.
Well, we've got to keep going, haven't we?
That's right.
But I've known him since I was 16, which is a long time.
That's right.
And we spent a golden wedding last year. We came to Sheffield. Ivy made us a family party there.
That must have been quite a party, because you've got quite a family there.
Yeah.
And of course you're generations of good cooks, aren't you?
Yes, that's why we get stout.
That's right, but it's worth it. Oh, it's worth it.
It's easier to be a good doctor in a country practice. We have it made. This country practice that you've taken some interest in because of my own association with it is to some degree a period piece. It's got a charm, which is the charm of phoniness. It's like roses round the rustic cottage wall. But there is still very much living truth in among the period charm. And if one could graft that into the community life and the medical care of cities, this would be marvelous. This would be a miracle.
Sometimes a doctor has to decide whether a patient is ill or not. 6-year-old Sarah is complaining of seeing spots before her eyes. The spots even appear in the pictures she draws.
Why you've drawn the various colours.
Her mother has called the doctor. He must decide whether the spots are real or imagined.
Do you know what are those spots supposed to be?
Chicken pox.
Are they? Have you seen some children with chicken pox recently? At school?
No.
Have you had chicken pox yourself?
You had the measles, not
You've had the measles, not chicken pox. It's a very pretty picture, isn't it? I just want you to stand up, love. Tell me a little bit about these colours you've been seeing with your eyes. Tell me about the purple. Where do you see them? If you're looking at your dad, do you see the coloured lights around him?
Yes.
You see them around him. Do you see coloured lights wherever you look? All right. Now, can you see all right when you're at school? Can you see the blackboard to do your lessons and things?
Only sometimes.
Do you have to sit near the front or not?
Yes.
What stops you seeing? When you say only sometimes, what is it that stops you seeing clearly? Is it the colours? All right, love, fine. Let's just have a little look at you now, shall we? Do you like school? What are you best at?
Sums.
Are you? You're best at sums. That's nice, isn't it?
Can you manage?
Yes, we manage fine. This is just going to feel a little bit tight around your arm. And what do you like doing best when you're playing? Do you have lots of friends at school? And what do you like to play best of all?
Mothers and fathers.
Mothers and fathers. That's a nice thing to play, isn't it? And which do you play, mother or father?
Mother.
Do you have babies? You don't have babies. This will just feel a little bit tight and then it'll go off.
Watch the clock then.
I want you to tell me when you see my which finger move, all right?
This one.
Good.
This one.
Very good. Well, I can find nothing really wrong with Sarah. She seems in pretty good health, really. I don't think there's any urgent need to take any further advice at this stage. I think if the symptoms persist and are a worry to you, then that is one of the main reasons why we should seek further advice for reassurance for you if the problem persists. But I'm quite happy to see her regularly and keep a close eye on her over the next few weeks.
Sometimes reassurance is the only effective treatment.
Some of the commonest diseases, if you like, that we see, some of the commonest diagnoses we make, are things like jealousy, boredom, loneliness. And these can be very depressing for a child, a very important part of the child's world. And they can have repercussions on relationships with parents, relationships with doctors, and relationships at school. So that you can get very big problems at school consequent on social disturbance, which is clearly more and more frequent in our very mobile and rather rootless society.
Often, day-to-day contact with the community is more important and more therapeutic than the doctor's clinical skills.
Hello, there's Joan. Hello, Joan.
Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Oh, fine, thanks now.
The kids all right?
Yes, thanks.
Well done. When I see her, I remember about 4 generations. I remember her parents and their dying. I remember the death of her husband.
Yes.
I delivered some of her sisters. And I'll never forget delivering you. Hello, Mr. Udall. I think it's helpful both to doctor and to patient if one tends to puff up the hills just a little more, find they're a little higher and steeper together. This is extremely relevant. And I think that one can discuss one's shortcomings on the football field or the golf club or even in the darts match with more sympathy and insight if one is aging with them.
Hello, it's the deputising service here. Have you got a call for us?
The contrasting face of general practice in the cities. This is the Sheffield Deputising Service. Its doctors stand in for regular practitioners unable to provide 24-hour care. It's a service paid for by the doctors themselves. Patients' calls are diverted to the central switchboard from doctors' surgeries. From here, details of cases are transmitted by radio to the service's own doctors as they travel throughout the city. Amongst the first calls tonight, an emergency. A woman has reported her husband is coughing up blood.
Is he vomiting at all?
This patient that we're going to, he's obviously likely to be a fairly urgent case in that the story sounds that he's vomiting blood. And he's presumably one of these either flared up acute erosions or he's an old ulcer case. Possibly he doesn't know that he's had an ulcer. Do you get many of these on the out of hours, the deputising service? Or are they fairly rare?
They are very rare, not many. We don't come across many at all.
Here, the doctor must start from scratch, knowing nothing of the patient's history. It's efficient, but impersonal.
I've just had discomfort rather than pain.
Throughout the day,
I felt full.
I see, sort of.
And I've been belching quite a bit.
I see. Can I just feel your abdomen, please? Do you still have the sense of this distension now at the moment?
Slight
Slight.
discomfort.
Just around here where I'm pressing, or is it all over?
No, more in
just
the
around
centre.
there. Okay.
You can hear a bit of.
Yes. Okay, I'm just going to listen to your abdomen, please. Okay, thank you. I think it is an ulcer, which has just, which is just bursted now, and probably you're bleeding a bit inside. And this black stuff which you have vomited is blood mixed with acid, you see, and the color is that way. So you might be bleeding at the moment, or maybe not. So its best thing is to send you into a hospital where they can look after you.
What sort of percentage of genuine emergency calls does the deputising service take, roughly at a guess?
I would think about 10%, roughly
10%.
genuine ones.
And what sort of proportion of calls would you say are fairly trivial rubbish? To the doctor, not necessarily to the anxious parent or the patient. What sort of percentage? Something like half?
I would say, I would
About
agree
half.
about it, yes.
And
definitely.
the rest need a doctor, but not necessarily an emergency service.
Yes, quite true.
Tell me, Doctor, why do you work for the emergency service?
It's for a more of, I would think about as a stimulus to what I do normally, because when I go to see a new patient, it's sort of a challenge to me, you see. I enter into a new place and I don't know anything about him at all, and
it's rather fun.
It's sort of you know, you have to, it's a sort of a challenge to me.
In many large cities, the demands made on doctors have sapped the high ideals taught in medical school.
Well, when I qualified, I thought I was going to see people who were ill. And I find that a very high proportion of my time is taken up by people who clearly are not. They will parade at extraordinarily frequent intervals across a year with the most incredibly trivial symptoms and complaints. Will come with bruises on the shin, a bruise on the forehead where the child fell over 3 days ago. They will come with the most incredibly trivial little coughs and colds. Now, I'm sure they must know full well, and certainly by previous experience, that the cough medicine they got last time didn't work, so it's unlikely that it's going to work this time. Cough medicines don't work. Witness the fact that there are so many varieties available. If one worked, the rest would be out of business. It seems that the general public today will not tolerate the most simple, trivial symptom.
And there's a further type of demand this doctor finds especially demoralising.
Well, I really find this quite unpleasant. It's one of the things that really upsets me. It seems to be an increasing trend. I would suspect more in town communities than in the country. I did actually work for nearly 2 years in the country. And one of the pleasures there is that families, from the children right through to the aged people, were kept as a unit. And all the families seemed to accept that it was their responsibility, insofar as was possible, to look after their parents. That doesn't mean that those who clearly should have been in hospital didn't have a hospital bed and were expected to be looked after at home. But in the city, the children have moved away. They've quite possibly changed their social status and some of their aspirations. They live a different lifestyle. Maybe the housing has moved Granny to a different part of the town where it isn't so convenient to get to them. Then Granny becomes ill. The family no longer regard it, in a very high proportion of cases, as any responsibility of theirs whatsoever to look after any sick relative. And they will actually say to me in as many words that they think that I ought to get the patient into hospital. In other words, they want them disposed of. But undoubtedly, it has a very profound effect. And you may say, well, we shouldn't let it, but we're human beings and you can't stop it. It's something that's there day in, day out, and water wears away stone, and by Jove, it's eating into my heart.
How likely is general practice to survive?
It's a difficult question. Crystal ball gazing is always a difficult pastime. I think that there are very many factors involved here. I think that the burden of the trivial call or consultation, especially in the cities, is somewhat demoralizing to the general practitioners. And this, again, is something which conflicts with his need for, like the rest of society, rather more leisure. And it's very difficult to maintain your morale year after year if a lot of your work is dealing with fairly trivial stuff. In the eyes of the doctor, they can be very urgent and provoking great anxiety in the patient. Another factor, I think, is that our society is uniquely good at coarsening and debasing relationships. Personal relationships, sexual relationships, and also the professional relationships, such as between a patient and a doctor. And yet, I think general practice has tended to survive in spite of the years of neglect and discouragement, because the doctor is very keen to provide that relationship, and the patient needs that relationship desperately badly. And if general practice is a dying art, then I think British medicine and our patients will be the poorer for its going.
Although he now holds a university post, Professor Wilkes still feels the need to continue the relationships he has built up with his patients over 21 years, and he still finds time to hold consultations.
Your blood pressure is normal. Clearly the small scar on your heart is trivial and well healed. And as Roosevelt said once, the only thing you have to fear is fear itself.
Yes.
But I think the tablets will help.
They do too.
I think that the consultation where the doctor and the patient are sharing the problems is still the one thing that holds the doctor-patient relationship together. This is the cement. And no matter how battered by the day one is, if one is in one's consulting room, alone with a patient, no matter how one is tired, no matter how one feels out of date and inadequate, every doctor gears himself to say, there is no right, there is no wrong, there is just a problem. And we have to share this problem brusquely, perhaps, rapidly, routinely. But the consultation is the cement. Without the consultation, we are the telephone pushers of drugs. This is not what medicine's about. I don't know you at all well. What sort of a person are you? Have you eczema as well?
Yes.
Have you? The classical picture of the patient with eczema is of someone who's rather nervous, rather intelligent, dripping with O-levels, and who doesn't need much sleep. How much of that is true of you?
Well, I wouldn't say I was exceptionally nervous, but I'm a teacher, so
So you're dripping with O-levels?
Not exactly dripping, but I've got quite a few.
Yeah, I see.
And I need rather a lot of sleep, so that doesn't count
No,
either.
that I think is probably the phoniest component of all. So really, you're, with your own experience behind you, you're not expecting quick, easy cures here.
Oh, good heavens, no.
And you're quite happy that you're going to cope with this problem.
Oh, yes.
Yes, of course you are. Could you put the baby on the couch and expose the day's problems to us?
Certainly.
All right. I'm pleased the last cream is working, because you've had quite an interesting few months, haven't you, really?
Oh, you could call it interesting, yes.
That's right. Oh, yes. That's a very good example. This is the sort of thing that people must have said to your parents if you had this in childhood. A beautiful case. That's right. Good. Remind me, the child's how old?
5 months.
And the skin rash began?
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day.
Yes.
So that something like 3 of the 5 months you've been battling on.
Virtually, yes.
And you're seeing genuine improvement over the last few weeks.
Oh, definitely. When he first got it, we couldn't put a finger on him that wasn't
No.
covered.
No. He's a most attractive morsel. All right. Well, I think we'll give you some more ointment.
Right.
We'll ask you to yell for help if you're in trouble.
Fine.
And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks just to keep in touch and make sure that everything is settling.
Right.
I think you're clever.
Oh, thank you.
This was just a sort of quick, routine reassurance session, with the GP being most in need of reassurance.
Why were you in need of reassurance?
Because this sort of situation, if it's as badly handled, if it's allowed to get out of control, can dominate and indeed lead to the sort of disintegration of family life. And a young baby in the home should be a great joy and a great treasure and something that pleasurably makes the whole house revolve round it. They can become terrible anxieties. They can become terrible burdens for young parents to bear. And this is what I wanted reassurance about. But of course one goes wrong. One makes mistakes. One is cutting corners, assessing the situation, the whole emotional environment of the patient as one talks. And one can make monumental errors. I remember a patient I've known for many years came in to see me complaining bitterly of a headache. Well now, 9 out of 10 headaches, even more, that come in to see a general practitioner are nervous anxiety headaches, what we call tension headaches. And I happen to know that she'd married off her beloved daughter 24 or 48 hours before. And this was an obvious tension headache. They'd obviously had a bit of a strain in administering the wedding. She was losing her beloved child. This was money for a rope. But some strange, humbling instinct made me take her temperature. Because sometimes A fever can give you a very bad headache. She had a high temperature. She had pneumonia. She was walking about with pneumonia, complaining of nothing but a headache. And she very nearly had her pneumonia treated by a sedative. This is the sort of trap that one makes one's living by, and it can be very worrying.
Sometimes consultations can be extended over many years. Although Frank was crippled by arthritis 17 years ago, long-term care from Professor Wilkes meant that he was able to continue in an arduous job, beating out kitchen sinks.
I was making sinks from start to finish, hammering, welding, grinding, soldering, and it was in my arms at the beginning, and they got, you know, some days I would have aches and pains that it were really, I should have been at home, but I felt I'd rather be at work. And I was fortunate in the fact I had a good friend who did a lot of the hammering for me. We worked together, you see, and shared more or less the work, and I did the welding and things like that. There was times, I suppose, when, you know, one wanted to sort of say, oh, I won't go to work. But yet, you've just got to keep going and accept the fact.
Wilkes kept Frank at work by exploiting the strong points in his character.
I knew something about his job. I knew something about his family circumstances. I knew something about his personality and his courage. And therefore, one of the most helpful things I could do in Frank's case was to let him get on with it. Not to intervene, not to mess about his whole attitude to his own life, but to see that he got, when he needed it, such help as modern medicine could give him, either through drugs or through more specialist services. And in this way, I could perhaps decide more accurately than anyone else what he needed in the way of help. I could decide when, for example, he should stay at work and come off work, and yet a consultant rheumatologist, if and when he saw Frank, and he only saw Frank very, very rarely, would be much more capable of assessing the damage or function in his shoulders or his wrists or his elbows. So in a way, we shared Frank. The consultant looked after the joints and I looked after the lifestyle. And I hope, as a result, Frank managed rather better than he would have otherwise done.
Frank's rheumatoid arthritis has slowly got worse, and he now has to do lighter work in the factory's packaging department. But he would have been there long ago if Wilkes had not been able to help him adjust to his illness over many years.
I don't think I should be working now if it wasn't for the doctor. Because I think you reach a stage where you give up hope, and like he once said to me, you know, you'll never be in a wheelchair. And I aren't, and I hope I never will be. And I don't think I will be because, well, I've weathered this 17 years, so I think I can weather the rest with the help of my doctor.
Cases like Frank's have convinced Professor Wilkes that whatever the pressures, the doctor-patient relationship must survive.
You start by being an enormous adult to a small baby, with cold hands, associated with needles, immunization, a strange place. So they only have to see you to scream blue murder, and their attitude to you is extremely hostile because you are outside the warm reassurance of mummy. Then, after a year or two's brainwashing that the doctor will make it better from mummy, you get an equally extreme reaction. You get a worship from the child. They follow you round with big eyes, and they know you will make them better. As most of their ailments are very transient and self-limiting, your cure rate is very nearly 100%, which reinforces this worship. So you have a marvelous relationship. At this sort of time, the child may well be a more accurate witness to the problem than the parents, who have all sorts of preconceived anxieties that embellish the story. So the child is not only a buddy, but an expert witness. And this is interesting. But as all things in life, it's temporary. And gradually, as they inch forward into their teens, their worship becomes again reversed, but this time into a disdain, a contempt for the overweight elderly man pushing pills across the desk because that's all he knows how to do. And this contempt for the out-of-date old quack becomes only gradually modified by the burdens of marriage and pregnancy and parenthood. So after all these ups and downs, you only attain a really stable relationship with your patients perhaps in their mid-20s. And at this sort of stage, again on a different plane, your colleagues for whom, as the decades slide by, the hills get a little higher and steeper. The breath has to be chased a little more assiduously. The memory for names goes, and you're sharing the human experience, until eventually, when the doctor dies, he attains a memorial service in the local church with the whole place packed with patience and cliches and half-sincere eulogy. It's not a bad life.